Today I'm going to finally attempt to answer the question I've been asked many times. But Sergio, the Sicilians survived all these invasions. Why did they then leave after the reunification with Italy? Very good question. Waves of invasions had used Sicily to generate money, export agriculture, or as part of using Sicily to attack somewhere else. The general well-being of the Sicilian population was at best an afterthought for these people. Natural disasters and disease also dramatically reduced the general quality of life of the average Sicilian. So get yourself a drink, as this gets complicated. And if you want to know more, I'm going to include the details of a book by Giuseppe Barone, but be warned, it's written in Italian. Between 1812 and 1890, Sicilian land was for sale. There was widespread land reform of areas which were previously owned by the state or owned by the church. This caused significant unrest as valuable hereditary family interests in Sicilian land were, inverted commas, privatised. Between 1861 and 1911, the Sicilian population grew by 60%, and there was significant rural to urban migration, as well as migration from central Sicily to the coastline. Between 1876 and 1900, 4% of the Sicilian population moved abroad. Let's try and break this down so it begins to make some sense. There was a population explosion, and the agricultural food production could not keep up with it. To learn more about La Bella Sicilia, consider subscribing. Part of the Sicilian rural to urban migration was caused by the small holdings of land being less productive, and these farmers experienced a crisis as their land was now unviable. Separately, there was a collapse in demand for the work of tradesmen and manufacturing as they came up against global competition. The new Italian government, based in Turin, embarked on a new adventure in capitalism and began to industrialise northern Italy. One consequence of emigration from southern Italy was that it reduced the levels of unemployment and saved Italy from the dramatic consequences of, on the one hand, a population explosion, and number two, a population it quite clearly could not feed. There were some patterns of emigration where Sicilians from specific areas congregated in the same destination abroad. This was quite noticeable in America, where certain blocks were largely populated by specific groups of immigrants. For example, Middletown, Connecticut had clusters of immigrants from Melilli, Syracuse. Hamilton, Canada was heavily populated by people from Racalmuto, Agrigento. The numerous Little Sicilies began as small family groupings and expanded as more people arrived. The large-scale emigration was seen as a giant opportunity for the criminal groups. There were poor, uneducated peasants, hardened criminals with extensive criminal records recorded in Sicily, people absconding from local disputes and debts, dealers in criminal goods, fixers, all eager to exploit the opportunities in North and South America. This also proved an opportunity to expand global criminal networks. Old mafia was rural, new mafia was urban. After the unification of Italy and Sicily, Palermo became a focus. It was the port of export for a number of agricultural products, wine and sulphur, which were driving the Sicilian economy from the 19th century. Emigration accelerated between 1901 and 1914 as 28% of the population of southern Italy was on the move. So where did they go? Well, 7% of the people moved to somewhere in Europe. 15% of the population moved to Argentina and Brazil. And fully 73% of the people moved to the United States of America. Families began to divide. One child sent abroad, while the other stayed in Sicily. Many wives were left in Sicily, while the menfolk went abroad to work. In many ways, the fabric of society began to fracture. Between 1911 and 1914, over 300,000 people left Sicily, but very few people emigrated from the great urban areas of Palermo, Messina, and Catania. Instead, smaller settlements suffered enormous losses. Often 10% of the working age male population left. This had an enormous impact on demographics. Having arrived in the new America, the Sicilians of Little Sicily were exposed to a radical melting pot of ethnicities, education, language, culture, and different ways of getting things done. Of course, they were also abused, subjected to prejudice and protection rackets. In the 20th century, there was a boom in goods and finance along the long-standing trade routes between Europe and America. In this period of significant change, the organised crime groups were quick to identify and exploit new streams of income and adopt violence if necessary. Any tender for services were vigorously contested by suppliers backed up by a local criminal group. Joe Petrosino was a famous Italian immigrant born in Salerno who was employed by the NYPD to combat organised crime. He understood the dialects, he understood the culture, and he pioneered revolutionary techniques of investigation to much success, once aiding the singer Enrico Caruso. He was investigating the criminal pasts of numerous suspects and travelled on an apparently secret mission to Sicily to gather evidence. He was betrayed and executed in 1909 in Palermo as he waited to meet an informant. Funerals were performed in both Palermo and New York for such an esteemed servant of the state. He was later buried in Queens, New York, alongside some of the suspects he was investigating. Having emigrated between 1905 and 1914, a third of the people returned to Sicily and were known as the failed emigrants. Regardless of any perceived failure, these returning people had learned language and culture of a more open entrepreneurial society, where things were done very differently from how they were done in Sicily. This was to cause a great disturbance on their return with the resident Sicilian population who were conditioned to accept the status quo. Returned failed emigrants emerged as figures promoting socialism across Sicily with fresh new ideas on how to work with the working and rural classes. Philip Mazzei, an Italian physician and friend of Thomas Jefferson, used the phrase, "All men are by nature equally free and independent." These words were later incorporated into the United States Declaration of Independence.